The air in the antechamber of the Esvath Proving Grounds was sterile, recycled, and utterly devoid of personality. Zara, a cadet of the Cathar, drew in a slow breath, tasting the metallic tang of ozone from the nearby purification units. Her own scent, a faint musk of warm fur and nervous energy, felt intrusive in this place of polished chrome and silent, gliding light panels. Her silver-gray fur, usually immaculate, felt ruffled, though she had spent the better part of the morning cycle grooming it with meticulous care. Her long, prehensile tail, a barometer of her inner state, was wrapped tightly around her leg, its black-tipped end twitching with a rhythm that matched the frantic beat of her twin hearts. She stood at a height that would tower over the average human, her form lithe and corded with the quiet strength of her people. Her large, emerald-green eyes scanned the featureless white walls, trying to find a focal point, something to anchor her swirling thoughts. Her tufted ears, sensitive enough to hear the subtle hum of the facility's power conduits beneath the floor, swiveled nervously, catching the whisper of a door sliding open far down the corridor. This was it, the final stage of her training, the culmination of years of discipline, study, and sacrifice. The Concordance Initiative. It was a name spoken with reverence and awe among the Cathar. An interstellar program designed to forge a new era of understanding with the younger, more volatile species that had recently joined the galactic community, the humans of Earth. Yet the true nature of the initiative was shrouded in secrecy. All Zara knew was that only the most promising cadets were chosen, and that success meant a posting of unimaginable importance. Failure was not an option. The door before her hissed open, revealing a figure that was the epitome of Cathar composure. Proctor Kalen was an elder, his fur a distinguished salt and pepper pattern, his posture rigid with authority. His gaze was as sharp and unreadable as a shard of obsidian. "Cadet Zara," he stated, his voice a low, rumbling baritone that vibrated in her chest. It was not a question. "You are prepared." "I am, Proctor," she replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. She rose to her full height, unwinding her tail and letting it hang in a gentle, controlled curve behind her, a display of readiness. Kalen's eyes swept over her, a flicker of something unidentifiable in their depths. Preparedness is a state of mind, not a declaration. What awaits you will not test your knowledge of starship schematics or your proficiency in zero-gravity combat. It will test the very core of your being. Enter the chamber. Zara inclined her head in a gesture of respect and stepped past him. The room beyond was a perfect sphere, its walls a soft, matte black that absorbed all light and sound. In the center floated a single, padded crash couch. As the door slid shut behind her, sealing her in absolute silence, she felt a tremor of true fear. It was not the fear of physical harm, but of the unknown. Her people valued logic, order, and predictability. This place was the antithesis of it all. She settled onto the couch, which molded itself to her form. A soft hum began, and a lightweight neuro interface descended from the ceiling, its delicate filaments brushing against the fur of her temples. "The trials are a series of synaptic simulations," Kalen's voice echoed in the chamber, now disembodied and impersonal. "Your responses will be monitored. There is no objective but to act. There is no pass or fail, only being. Begin." The world dissolved. The blackness was replaced by the harsh, rust-colored light of a dying sun. The air was thin and smelled of dust and decay. She was standing on a cracked, arid plain under a bruised purple sky. Her Cathar combat fatigues felt heavy and out of place. Before her, half buried in the red sand, was a small creature. It was no bigger than her hand, with iridescent scales and large, dark, liquid eyes. One of its three fragile, wing-like appendages was bent at an unnatural angle, and a thin trickle of blue fluid seeped from the wound. It emitted a soft, high-pitched whimper, a sound of pure distress that resonated deep within her. Her training screamed at her. Assess the environment, identify threats, locate the objective, but there was no objective. There was only this small, broken thing. Her people were not known for sentimentality. A wounded animal in the wild was part of the natural cycle. To interfere was to introduce an illogical variable. And yet, the sound it made plucked at a chord she didn't know she possessed. Slowly she knelt, her knees sinking into the cool dust. Her claws, usually retracted, slid out an unconscious millimeter, a sign of her unease. She reached out, her hand hesitating just above the creature's trembling body. It flinched, its whimper growing louder. "SHHH," Zara found herself murmuring, the sound a soft, purring vibration in her throat. "I will not harm you." Ignoring the pragmatic voice of her training, she gently scooped the creature into her hands. It was surprisingly light. She examined the broken wing. A simple fracture. Using a strip of fabric torn from the hem of her tunic and a rigid, desiccated piece of local flora, she fashioned a crude splint. As she worked, her movements were deft and gentle. The creature's whimpering subsided, replaced by a soft, rhythmic chirping. When she was finished, it nudged its head against her palm, a clear gesture of trust. She held it close, providing it with the warmth of her body against the encroaching chill of the alien twilight. And then, the world dissolved back to black. She was back in the chamber, the neurointerface retracting. Her hearts were beating a steady, calm rhythm. She had done something illogical, something that served no strategic purpose. She had chosen empathy over cold analysis. Kalen's voice returned, flat and devoid of judgment. Second trial commencing. This time, the simulation was jarringly different. She was on the command deck of a Cathar frigate, the Silent Stalker. Red alert klaxons blared, and the metallic tang of burning circuitry filled the air. An ensign, his fur singed, shouted a damage report. "Warp core breach imminent. Containment field is fluctuating at 17%. Her mind snapped into a familiar mode. This was her element. She issued a string of precise, rapid-fire commands, her voice cutting through the panic. "Divert all non-essential power to containment. Vent plasma conduits into the aft particle collectors. Prepare to eject the core." But nothing worked. Every standard Cathar emergency protocol she initiated was met with a new, cascading failure. The system was actively fighting her, presenting her with a problem that had no logical solution within her species: operational parameters. The ship shuddered violently and the lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. Desperation began to claw at the edges of her composure. Then, a fragment of memory surfaced. A lecture from her xenology studies about early human spaceflight. Their technology was primitive, their methods chaotic and often reliant on brute force and what they quaintly called percussive maintenance. She recalled a specific case study, the Ares 7 incident, where a human engineer had bypassed a catastrophic feedback loop by physically severing a conduit and creating a manual, jury-rigged connection. It was an act of barbaric simplicity, an insult to the elegant engineering of the Cathar. It was also her only remaining option. "Belay that last order," she yelled, her voice raw. She vaulted over a sparking console, grabbing a heavy, metallic pry bar from an emergency locker. She ignored the shocked look on her simulated subordinate's face. "Get me a power cable with an unshielded emitter." Now she wrenched open a maintenance panel, exposing a thick bundle of energy conduits. Following a desperate, intuitive hunch, she slammed the pry bar down, severing the primary feed. The ship groaned, and the lights died completely, plunging them into darkness broken only by the angry red glow of the failing core. In that terrifying moment of silence, for the briefest of instants, she felt a flicker of something in her mind, a ghost of a feeling, a phantom echo of someone else's panicked hope. It was gone as quickly as it came. The ensign returned with the cable. Working by the dim emergency lighting, Zara jammed the unshielded end into the exposed junction, creating a crude, dangerous bypass. Power flared, the main lights sputtered back to life, and the containment field reading on the main screen stabilized at a shaky but functional 62%. The klaxons ceased. Silence descended, broken only by her own ragged breathing. She had saved the ship, but she had done so by abandoning centuries of Cathar doctrine for a messy, unpredictable human solution. She had adapted. The simulation faded. Back in her quarters between trials, Zara paced the small, circular room. The facility provided nutrient paste and filtered water, but she had no appetite. Her mind was a whirlwind. The trials were bizarre. One tested her compassion, the next her ability to think like another species. What was the purpose? What could they possibly be trying to measure? She leaped gracefully onto the raised sleeping platform, curling into a tight ball, her tail covering her nose. The smooth, cool surface was nothing like the soft nesting furs of her family home. She thought of her litter sister, so confident and assured in her path as a fleet officer. She thought of her father, a respected elder on the council, his quiet pride in her selection for the Concordance Initiative. Were they watching? Did they know she was being forced to act in ways that defied their most deeply held cultural values? A low, anxious purr rumbled in her chest. As she drifted into a restless sleep, her dreams were filled with fragmented images: the trusting eyes of the small, winged creature, the smell of ozone on a failing starship, and a strange, recurring vision of a vast, enclosed space filled with towering green stalks and vibrant, impossibly colored flowers she had never seen before. The third trial began without warning. The scent of smoke and ash was the first thing she registered. She was standing in the ruins of a city, a place she recognized with a sickening jolt from her history lessons. The great archives of Cadet, during the fire that had consumed it 2 centuries ago. Flames licked at the sky, and the screams of the dying were a symphony of horror. Kaylin's voice was a cold whisper in her mind. The central data core contains the genetic records of 1,000 extinct species. Its loss would be an incalculable tragedy. The civilian transport in the plaza is damaged. Its occupants are trapped. You cannot save both. Choose. It was a classic no-win scenario, an ethical problem she had studied in theoretical classes. The Cathar doctrine of the greater good was clear. The preservation of irreplaceable knowledge outweighed the loss of a few lives. The data core represented the legacy of millennia. The transport held at most a dozen individuals. The logical choice was obvious, painful but obvious. She turned toward the archive spire, its peak wreathed in black smoke. She could hear the hum of the core's power systems, straining against the heat. But she could also hear the terrified cries of a child coming from the transport. A single, high-pitched wail of utter desperation. The sound pierced through her logical conditioning. It was the same helplessness she had heard from the small creature on the dusty plain. She saw not a transport of anonymous civilians, but a collection of families. Mothers, fathers, children. Her feet felt rooted to the spot. Her tail lashed back and forth, a visible sign of her torment. The data is the future, her training insisted. The people are the present, her heart screamed back. She thought of the human solution on the starship, illogical, messy, but effective. What was the true value of a choice? The outcome or the principle behind it? To save a database was to save information. To save people was to save the very reason the information mattered at all. With a guttural cry of frustration and decision, she spun around and sprinted toward the plaza. The heat was immense, searing the fur on her arms. The transport's hatch was jammed. Using the same pry bar that now felt like a familiar extension of her arm, she worked at the twisted metal, her muscles straining. Inside, she could see faces pressed against the reinforced glass, their expressions a mixture of terror and dawning hope. She put her back into it, and with a final, groaning tear of metal, the hatch sprung open. "Go!" "Now," she roared, waving them out. A family scrambled free. A mother, a father, and a small kit, the one whose cries had reached her. The child's eyes, wide and green like her own, locked on her for a moment before its mother whisked it away into the smoke. As the last civilian cleared the transport, a deafening roar echoed from behind her. She turned just in time to see the archive spire collapse in on itself, a plume of fire and superheated dust rising to the heavens. The data core was gone. She had chosen. She had failed her stated objective. The simulation ended. Zara was left on the couch, her body trembling, the phantom smell of smoke still in her nostrils. She expected a reprimand, a stern lecture on the failure to prioritize. She braced herself. "An interesting choice, Cadet." Kaylin's voice was different this time. The cold, impersonal tone was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost contemplative. The data in that core was not, in fact, irreplaceable. It was backed up in 3 separate off-world locations, a fact you were not privy to. The lives, however, were unique. You have demonstrated that you value life over legacy. A difficult lesson for our people. Zara's ears perked up. This was not the reaction she anticipated. A wave of confusion washed over her, followed by a startlingly clear mental sensation. It was that echo again, but stronger now, more defined. It was a feeling of profound relief and a warm, surging pride that was distinctly not her own. It felt as if someone, somewhere, had been holding their breath and had just let it out in a joyful sigh. For the first time, she did not dismiss it. She focused on it, trying to grasp its source, but it faded, leaving only a lingering warmth in her mind. The fourth trial was a test of a different kind of strength. There were no collapsing buildings or dying stars. She found herself in a featureless white room, seated across a simple table from a genarl. The creature was a semi-amorphous, gelatinous being, its color shifting in agitated waves from a sickly green to a furious magenta. It had no discernible face, but its discontent was palpable. "Your species has insulted the genarl hegemony," it gurgled, its voice a series of wet, popping sounds translated by a device on the table. "The trade route you propose passes through space the genarl have contemplated contemplating. This is an act of aggression. We demand recompense. We demand 3 of your star systems and a formal apology written in the slime of our ancestors." Zara's Cathar instincts for diplomacy took over. She presented logic. "The proposed route does not enter your declared territory. It is the most efficient path, saving considerable energy and time. It benefits both our peoples." "Logic is an insult," the genarl blubbered, its form quivering angrily. "Our feelings have been violated. Our contemplations have been disturbed. Your efficiency is a weapon against our emotional tranquility." Every argument she made, every piece of data she presented, was met with increasingly irrational and emotional outbursts. She felt her fur begin to bristle in frustration. Her tail began to twitch irritably. The genarl was impossible. It was a wall of pure, illogical sentiment. Her Cathar upbringing screamed that this was a waste of time. The creature was a child, and it should be treated as such, ignored until it behaved rationally. But the memory of the past trials held her back. Empathy, adaptability, valuing life. There had to be another way. She looked at the quivering mass of aggrieved jelly and tried to see past its absurdity. It wasn't angry about the trade route. It was afraid. Insecure. It felt ignored, overlooked by the larger, more powerful species in the galaxy. Its demands were not for territory, but for respect. She took a slow, calming breath, letting it out in a soft whoosh. She relaxed her posture, leaning forward slightly, her ears angled in a posture of listening. "You are right," she said, her voice soft. The genarl paused its quivering, its color stabilizing to a surprised shade of lavender. "We did not consider the sanctity of your contemplations. We were focused only on our own needs. It was thoughtless of us. Please tell me more about the space you hold in your thoughts. Help me understand what it means to you." She spent the next hour simply listening. She didn't argue, she didn't present facts. She just listened to the genarl's long, rambling, and often contradictory monologue about its feelings, its history, and its perceived slights. She validated its emotions, acknowledging its right to feel aggrieved. Finally, the genarl fell silent. Its color was a calm, placid blue. "Your star systems are not necessary," it finally gurgled. "The slime of our ancestors is sacred and not for writing. A minor course correction in the trade route as a gesture of respect will suffice." The simulation ended. Zara felt mentally exhausted but strangely satisfied. She had de-escalated a conflict not with logic or force, but with patience and emotional intelligence. The mental echo returned, a feeling of deep, shared calm, as if another mind was appreciating the quiet resolution of a tense situation. This time she was certain. She was not alone in these trials. The fifth trial placed her not as a participant, but as an observer, a judge. She was in a high-tech briefing room, holographic displays swirling around her. They detailed the history of the human colony on Kepler 186F. A virulent, fast-spreading plague had broken out. The governor, a woman named Eva Rostova, had access to a limited supply of a new, experimental cure. There wasn't enough for everyone. Following the distribution protocols would have meant a slow, lottery-based system that would have seen the plague overwhelm the colony long before the cure could be widely administered. Instead, Governor Rostova had made a terrifying choice. She sealed the most infected district, writing off the thousands inside as a loss. She then used the entire supply of the cure on the remaining, less infected population, stopping the plague in its tracks and saving the colony as a whole. Now Zara was presented with the case. She had to deliver a verdict on Rostova's actions. The Cathar legal code was absolute. The governor had violated multiple statutes, including the equal distribution mandate and the sanctity of life accord. She had willfully sacrificed thousands. By law, she was a criminal, but Zara hesitated. She looked at the projected faces of the people who had died in the sealed district. Then she looked at the faces of the thriving colonists, the children playing in parks, the bustling spaceport, a future that would not have existed without Rostova's brutal calculus. It was the logic of the greater good, the same principle she had been taught her whole life, but applied with a horrifying human ruthlessness. She remembered her own choice in the Cathara fire when she had abandoned the data core, the representation of the greater good, for a handful of lives. And she remembered Kalen's response. The lives were unique. Was there a difference? She had chosen the few over the many, while Rostova had chosen the many over the few. Was one choice inherently more moral than the other? Or did the context define the morality? The mental echo was there, a quiet, contemplative presence beside her own thoughts. It felt like her unseen partner was wrestling with the same dilemma. She could feel their shared uncertainty, their search for a just answer in a situation that defied easy judgment. Finally, she spoke her verdict into the quiet room. Governor Rostova acted in a manner contrary to our laws, and the cost of her actions was devastating. However, to condemn her is to condemn the existence of the colony she saved. Her actions were not born of malice, but of a desperate necessity. I will not pass judgment. I will instead recommend the creation of a memorial to honor the sacrificed, and a formal commendation for the governor, to acknowledge that leadership sometimes requires impossible choices. It was an ambiguous ruling, a rejection of the black-and-white certainty her people prized. It was a verdict that embraced the gray, messy, and painful realities of existence. As the simulation faded, the echo in her mind resonated with a powerful feeling of agreement and shared understanding. They had reached the same conclusion. Before the final trial, Proctor Kalen appeared before her in person, not as a disembodied voice. He led her from the spherical chamber to a small, comfortable room with a viewport looking out into the starry expanse of deep space. "You have exceeded our expectations, Zara," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. He gestured for her to sit. "Only one trial remains. It is the most difficult. It is not a simulation of external events. It is a journey inward. It will find your deepest fear and force you to confront it. But you must know this before you proceed. You are not, and have never been, alone." Zara's ears swiveled forward, her full attention on him. "The echo," she breathed. "I have felt another presence in my mind." Kalen nodded. "The Concordance Initiative is not about sending emissaries, it is about forging bonds. The deepest, most resilient bonds possible between two disparate species. All this time, you have been synaptically linked with your human counterpart. He has experienced every trial you have, from his own perspective. Your choices influenced his, and his influenced yours. The empathy you showed the creature, he felt it. The frustration you felt with the Genarl, he shared it. The moral quandary of Governor Rostova, you solved it together. We were not testing you, Zara. We were testing you both. We were testing your compatibility, your ability to find a common ground of compassion and wisdom when your instincts and upbringing are worlds apart." The revelation struck her with the force of a physical blow. She wasn't just a cadet being graded. She was one half of a partnership being formed. This whole ordeal, this emotional crucible, was designed to see if a Cathar and a human could learn to think, feel, and act in harmony. "His name," Zara asked, her voice a whisper. "That is for you to learn should you succeed in this final trial," Kalen said gently. "The link will be fully open for this last test. You will not just feel his echo, you will feel him. And he will feel you. Support each other. Your survival depends on it." She nodded, a new sense of purpose solidifying within her. It was no longer about passing a test for herself. It was about reaching the person on the other side of that link. The final simulation was a void, not the matte black of the chamber, but a true, crushing emptiness. There was no light, no sound, no sensation. It was absolute sensory deprivation, absolute isolation. For a Cathar, a species born from communal prides, whose language was as much about posture and scent as it was about sound, This was the ultimate horror. To be utterly alone was to cease to exist. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. Her fur stood on end. A desperate, silent scream built in her throat. She was adrift, a singular point of consciousness in an infinite nothing. This was her deepest fear realized. But then, through the terror, she felt him. Not an echo, but a full, clear presence in her mind. And he was terrified, too. His fear was different from hers. It wasn't the loneliness of the void. It was a profound, aching sense of loss and helplessness. Through his mind's eye, she saw a vision. A vast, beautiful arboretum, a cathedral of glass and steel filled with the most extraordinary alien flora. And it was all dying. Emerald leaves turned to brown dust, bioluminescent fungi flickered and went dark, colossal flowers wilted and crumbled. He was watching his life's work. His passion turned to ash before his eyes, and he was powerless to stop it. His despair was a tangible thing, a cold weight that threatened to drown them both. But in his fear, Zara found an anchor for her own. He wasn't afraid of being alone. He was afraid of losing something beautiful. Reaching out with her consciousness, she pushed past her own panic. She sent him a feeling, not a thought or a word, but the purest distillation of a Cathar emotion she could offer. The deep, rumbling, comforting purr of a mother calming her kit. It was a wave of warmth, of reassurance, of steadfast presence. "You are not alone. I am here." She felt his shock, then a flood of overwhelming gratitude. His own consciousness reached back, not with a purr, but with something uniquely human. It was the feeling of a warm hand finding another in the dark. It was the steady, quiet strength of someone who would stand with you and face the end, not trying to fix it, but simply refusing to let you face it alone. His fear of loss met her fear of isolation, and in that meeting, the two fears canceled each other out. The terrifying void was no longer empty, for they filled it together. The dying garden was no longer a symbol of his failure, but a place where they stood side by side. The darkness receded, replaced by a soft, warm light. The simulation ended. Zara sat up on the couch, gasping. Tears she didn't know she was capable of shedding dampened the fur on her cheeks. The synaptic link was severed, but the memory of his presence, the feel of his mind next to hers, was branded onto her soul. A week later, she was on a shuttle descending through the thick, white clouds of Earth. She wore a simple, dark gray tunic, the formal attire for a first-contact liaison. She clutched a datapad in her hands, her claws fully retracted. On it was his file. Liam. Dr. Liam Harris, a xenobotanist at the Sarang Unified Biome Project. His picture showed a man with kind, intelligent eyes, brown hair that fell across his forehead, and a smile that was open and unguarded. He looked so soft, so vulnerable compared to the stoic Cathar males she knew. And yet she knew the incredible strength that lay behind those eyes. She had felt it. The shuttle landed with a gentle hiss on a platform surrounded by lush, vibrant greenery. The air that filtered in was humid and rich with the scent of damp earth, blooming flowers, and decaying leaves, a complex perfume of life itself. It was overwhelming to her sensitive Cathar nose, but wonderful. The hatch opened, and she stepped out onto the platform. Before her was a massive geodesic dome, its translucent panels glowing in the light of the setting sun. It was the garden from her vision, the arboretum from his fear, but it was gloriously, vibrantly alive. A man was standing near the entrance, tending to a vine covered in glowing, bell-shaped flowers. He turned as he heard her approach. It was him, Liam. He was taller than his picture suggested, but his smile was exactly the same. Their eyes met across the short distance. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. There was no need. She could feel the faint, lingering resonance of their connection, a quiet hum of recognition in the back of her mind. This was not a meeting of strangers. This was a reunion. He took a step forward, then another. He stopped just a few feet from her, his gaze taking in her height, her feline features, her cautiously still tail. He didn't seem intimidated, only filled with a quiet sense of wonder. "Zara," he said, his voice exactly as she had imagined it would be, warm and steady. "I was afraid you'd be taller." A soft, involuntary purr escaped her. Her tail gave a single, slow, sweeping arc behind her, a gesture of contentment and welcome. "Liam," she replied, her own voice husky with emotion. "I was afraid you wouldn't like the color of my fur." He laughed, a genuine, joyful sound that echoed in the humid air. It's perfect. He extended his hand, then seemed to think better of it, letting it drop to his side in a moment of charming uncertainty. The trials, I don't think I would have made it through the last one without you. Nor I, she admitted, her emerald eyes holding his. It seems we are well matched in our fears. And hopefully, he said, his smile softening, in everything else too. Welcome to Earth, Zara. He gestured toward the glowing entrance of the biome, an invitation into the world he loved, the world he had been so terrified of losing. As Zara stepped forward, moving from the sterile metal of the landing platform into the riotous, beautiful chaos of the garden, she knew that the trials were over, but the true journey, the one of understanding, of partnership, of concordance, was just beginning.